Good afternoon. We are now on to our last session, being Legacy of Guru Padmasambhava, Rituals and Mandala Drawings. It's quite an amazing panel that we have here actually today. It's being chaired by Rajiv Mehrotra, who's the who's Foundation of Universal Responsibility of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. That's amongst one of the things that he does. He's been a filmmaker for a long, long time, great practitioner, and a good friend, and happened to go up to a fairly serious college and did well at the university there. So can I ask you to come on to... And then we have Khenpo, Lobsang, Tsultrim, Bhutia, also a scholar from Ladakh. So we have actually quite a few people. Then we come and sit. Phuntsho, please join us. He's one of the few people that I know who has been in both sides. He has monastic training in Tango and in Mysore, and then he studied in Oxford, taught in Cambridge. So, and then he's written books on the history, and he runs a very successful entrepreneurship program for the youth in Bhutan. So we're very lucky to have him here. Pranshu, young gentleman, he says he's still a student. He just finished his PhD from Delhi University in Buddhism, and also well known. Rajiv knows him well. So I am now just going to hand over to Rajiv to take over this last session almost, before we have the valedictory following this. So before we start, can we just have the opportunity? You can get one more. Share. Thank you. You could last minute. You have to wait.
On it.
No, thank you. We're going to give you a nice colorful. Thanks.
It's a curry stuff. Yeah, put it on my neck. Thank you. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome. I think the sort of the post-lunch slump has been, pretty infectious to a lot of our colleagues and fellow participants in what has been a very invigorating, insightful conference. And I guess even sort of the thought and images, and we've learned of the power of visualization. And I think so when you visualize Padmasambhava, there's sort of a great deal of energy and drive, and I think that hasn't persuaded enough people to be awake enough to be here, but hopefully people will continue to join us. I mean, just personally, I feel completely out of my depth and wondering what I'm doing here. I'm just a very how do I put it, a starting out aspirant who's been privileged to meet and engage with great teachers and great masters, and to have friends like Arun Kapoor and Shyam Saran, who have been most indulgent to me, and so I find myself sitting here amongst sort of distinguished scholars, practitioners, and academics on both sides of this table. So without much ado, I will just sort of, plunge into the discourse, and I'd like to invite Khenpo, Lobsang, Tsultrim, and I think that, they've all had brief introductions, but, he teaches Buddhist philosophy and psychology as assistant professor at the Central Institute of Buddhist Studies in Leh. And there is so much else, but it's all here. So I invite you to set the ball rolling.
Dharma, Hetu Prabhava, Hetum Tesham, Tathagato, Hevadat Desham Chaya Niroda, Ebamati Mahasharmana. Chonam Tamse Gulejung, Tegu Deshin Shebasung, Gula Goba Kanyaba, Genjun Chembe Dikesung, Sarva Papasa Akaranam, Kushalasa Upasampada, Sajit Pariyotpanam, Etam Buddhang Sasanam. Dipachia Michashing, Gawapusum Sobasho, Rangi Sydney Yonsutul, Dinisange Tembai. Before making my presentation, I'm just reciting the two main stanzas of Buddhism. These two main stanzas of Buddhism is the essence of Buddhism. So before presenting my paper on the topic, I recite this, that the Buddhism is concluded in these two very important stanzas. With this, respected chairman of this last technical session, Shri Rajiv Mehrotra ji, and my co-speaker of this session, and all the scholars who came from different institutions, and the participants, and all the attendees. My topic to present is on the concept of ritual and mandala drawing in Vajrayana system of Buddhism. In my paper, research paper, first I try to illustrate that Guru Padmasambhava in Tibetan language, it is translated as Guru Pema Jungne. I'm talking about the Guru Pema Jungne, not a timeless Guru Pema Jungne, but the historical aspect of Guru Pema Jungne. Guru Pema Jungne, he took birth at the place which is still the object of disputation, subject of disputation, sorry. But I'm referring one text, the text written by the Jonang Taranatha. In his text, he clearly, pristinely, purely referred that Guru Pema Jungne was born in the place called Sahor, and it is a Swat Valley. But up to now, I can say it, but it is still the subject of research. So this historical aspect of Guru Pema Jungne went to Tibet, and the date, it is also clearly mentioned in that text. He is the contemporary of the Devapala, the Pala dynasty, 8th century. He went to Tibet under the invitation of then king of Tibet, Tisong Deusen. And Tisong Deusen was given the recommendation, he received the recommendation from his advisor, the then spiritual advisor, Acharya Shanti Rakita. And upon his advice, king sent invitation to Guru Padmasambhava, and then Padmasambhava accepted the invitation, and in that invitation, the main purpose of inviting him to Tibet is only the dual purpose to be done. The first purpose is to construct the great historical Samye monastery The second purpose is to establish Vajrayana system of Buddhism there in Tibet. Upon reaching to Tibet, Guru Pema Jungne succeeded in his mission, and he firmly, first he introduced Vajrayana system of Buddhism in Tibet, and then he established Vajrayana system of Tibetan in Buddhism, Vajrayana system of Buddhism in Tibet. Then after, because I'm telling this because our conference is on the life and legacy of Guru Padmasambhava. The Vajrayana system of Buddhism, in that system, the two things is very important as a tool. The first one is about the ritual, and the second one is about Mandala, because I have to illustrate my own understanding about the only concept of ritual and only concept of Mandala in Vajrayana system of Buddhism. The first thing, the ritual. The word ritual is the English version. In mostly dictionary, especially in Wikipedia, is written clearly that it is a process which is done, which is performed in the ceremony. This is the meaning of ritual given in the Wikipedia. But the ritual, but I'm not using the word ritual, but I don't have any words substitute than ritual, because in Vajrayana system, the word ritual is used as a substitution of choga. Choga is a Tibetan word. And the choga word is translated, it is the Tibetan word, it is translated as the Sanskrit term vidhi, because this is used in the Tibetan traditional texts. I'm giving the reference that the text called Lama Chöba, which is written by Lingre Dorje Gyabo. He is a Tibetan Sanskrit scholar of 13th century. In his text, labeled as Lama Chöba, in the beginning, when he tried to write at the prologue, he said that in the language of Arya Bharata, it is said, labeled a name as Guru Puja Vidhi. And it is in Tibetan, it is said as Lama Chöbe Choga. Chu Vidhi and Choga, this is the word. But we don't have other words more sophisticated than the ritual in English. So I don't have any substitution word which carry the essence, core meaning of the choga and the vidhi. So what is the meaning of the choga? What is the meaning of the vidhi? And if you find dictionary, especially in Sanskrit, if you find the meaning of the vidhi in Apte dictionary, which is very prominent, very we consider as a very authentic, vidhi is the systematic process which is done accordingly, orderly, and in the sequential way. This is what we call a vidhi. And same is described and explained in Tibetan dictionary, which is named as Dhyasadic. Same. So the vidhi, the proper word, the vidhi, and the choga is for ritual. Because I think that in ritual, the word carry some sort of influence of Christianity, because in Christian, the ritual is done in the ceremony in the church. That's the reason the dictionary, carry this all, definition from the Christian belief. So this is not exactly, the same meaning as, choga or vidhi in Vajrayana system of Buddhism. But the choga and vidhi is the meaning is the systematic approach, systematic process, which is done, which is performed in orderly or sequential way. But this vidhi can be originated from the authentic source. Authentic source means here the person who got enlightened from his or her own direction. This can be composed, this can become down. But still in the practice without any adulteration and error. This is what we call the vidhi and choga as per the concept of Vajrayana system of Buddhism. And the second point that I try to illustrate here is in choga, in vidhi or in choga, there are various kind of divisions in it. The water offering choga or vidhi, mental offering choga or vidhi, mantra chanting choga or vidhi, sadhana dupa choga or vidhi, so on. Choga can be done when especially in the Vajrayana system, when we perform the choga or vidhi, the three main aspects of rules or law can be followed. Without it, then it's not a choga. So those three rules is, first, the preparatory part is first the person who is performing the choga or vidhi, who is doing the practice. First, he has to start it with taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then it is followed by the bodhicitta, the mind for enlightenment. These two is the preparatory parts. Without it, choga becomes incomplete. In order to make choga complete, the first, this necessary tools is very important. The first tool is this. And the second one is, while performing the choga, while doing the choga, I'm not talking about the Vajrayana system in particular, but in general, while doing the choga, during that time, the person who is performing the choga must have reached up to the, must have reached or must have, some sort of, energy of bodhicitta within him or her. This is what we call, in Tibetan language, the phrase is that Thomar Jorwa Semke ge Thamba. This is the first thing. Mushi Mimi ge Thamba. Actual part is all the choga can be performed in the total understanding or realization of the reality, that is union with primordial mind. This is the actual part of choga. And third part, it's very important, conclusive part, is that whatever we procure, the virtuous deed, by performing so and so choga, that should be dedicated. These three, je ngoye thamba, thomar sengi ge thamba, bardu unshi ge thamba, unshi mimi ge thamba, je ngoye thamba. These three are the indivisible part, threefold practice of choga. This is the concept of choga in general Buddhism. But in Vajrayana system of Buddhism, when we perform the choga, same, we have to follow the three law, but we have to add on some more thing. First, in Vajrayana system, taking refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, this is the external object of refuge. And inner object of refuge is Lama, Guru, Hidam, Ishtadeva, personal deity, tutelary deity. Ishtadeva is considered as Dhamma. That's the reason we visualized Ishtadeva with you, oneself. And third one is Dhaka or Dhaki. Dhaka or Dhaki is, there are two persons. This is an environment. Dhaka or Dhaki is the secret object of refuge. This is the inner object of refuge. The third one is your own nature of mind, primordial awareness. This one is the third one. That's the reason Buddha always say, you are your own light. You are your own, you, that refers to your own primordial consciousness. This one is the ultimate, object of refuge. So this is very important while performing the, Vajrayana practice through choga. And then the second part is generating the mind of enlightenment. There are two types of mind of enlightenment. The one is the conventional level, and the second one is the ultimate level. This is also to be practiced, try to be practiced. We have to generate the fakely first. This is also the a preparatory part of choga while performing Vajrayana practice. The third one is generate the immeasurable, the four immeasurable one: compassion, love and kindness, and equanimity. And this four kind, this should be generated. And then, on the generation of this thing, the fourth one is very important. Visualize one's own body as your own Ishtadeva. This one, visualize your sound as a mantra of Ishtadeva. Visualize your mind, perform as the mind of your Ishtadeva. This should be done while doing the practice in the name of choga, which is as a part of, preparatory part of Vajrayana system of Buddhism, choga. And then after that, this three is very important. Then, while sitting in that, in that preciousness, then you can perform. Because Vajrayana system is very important. While you practicing Vajrayana system, you cannot practice the Vajrayana system with this impure body. It can be, your body should be changed, make pure through visualization, your body, speech, and mind. So that's the reason Vajrayana system should be performed. Not with this body, but your body should be pure with the help of your tutelary deity, because tutelary deity is the Dhamma. Dhamma can be used on you. Then there are many, I have written in my paper, and also I have submitted the paper to the organizer member. The fourth one, the seventh one, the preparatory part of 7.1 is after that the ritual of doing a obstacle, exiting the obstacle, and also visualizing oneself as a personal deity. And this is the in Tibetan Gektu the Sunkur. This can be done. And then this up to here, this is the 7 systematic approach. This is the preparatory part of ritual in Vajrayana system of Buddhism. The actual part, while sitting in that awareness, while sitting in this preciousness, I can use the word preciousness because this is the word of Saraha, not my me. So while sitting in this preciousness, the actual part, we have to invite all the general and particular wisdom deity at Jnana Sattva, Ishepa. Visualize in front of you as a Samaya Satta, Thamsikpa, as per the sadhana's direction. But during that time also you must have a slight contact with that preciousness. Without it, you are not a Vajrayana practitioner. And then mixing, and then taking the Wang Abhisheka empowerment, and dissolution ritual is followed accordingly. And then taking oath or giving commitment ritual is also performed accordingly. The fourth one is the outer inner sacred offering, Chi Choba, Nangi Choba, Sangwe Choba, Dekhono Choba. This is the fourth one. And also, after that, praising to body, speech, and mind. This is also the Toba Choga. And appeasement ritual must be done after that, Tudam Kanwa. And ritual of confession, Shakpa. And supplicating one's wishes, Suatapa. These 8 part of kind of practice, which is in the systematic, which can be done through systematic way. And this 8 part is the actual part of the choga. And last part, conclusive part, make supplementary offering as refreshment to 3 jewel. In Tibetan it is said choba khaso, and other wisdom deities as visualized. And then make supplementary praise as refreshment to the same object. Make a confession note for doing omissions and duplication while making ritual, means that Hakje in Tibetan. And then fourth one, the note for fulfilling omission duplication in ritual is done through reciting Vajrasattva mantra for 3 times. And then fifth one is the prayer of dissolution of main and branches object refuge is performed. The sixth one, ultimately, the dissolution, because I'm saying that while you are performing the choga, during that time you are in that preciousness. You are not a ordinary being. You are a precious being, so we have to dissolve that you. Ultimately, the dissolution of all the object can be done through visualization in one's own nature, by remaining, and the seventh one, by remaining in the state of emptiness, visualize oneself as one own personal deity, like a fish coming out from the river, and then dedicational, aspirational, and the auspicious prayer should be done. And these are the, the 3-fold of choga. The first one is the preparatory choga, second one is the actual choga, the third one is the conclusive part of choga. This is the systematic approach should be done while performing Vajrayana system of Buddhism in any way. And then this up to here, it's about I have just it's about the ritual. And then in regard to the mandala, the concept about the mandala, especially in the Vajrayana system of Buddhism, mandala drawing in Vajrayana system carries deep meaning as well as choga. In Vajrayana system, mandala drawing have important role in making every sort of Vajrayana practice complete, perfect, to meet the purpose as wished for. The mandala is a Sanskrit term and meant externally as three-dimensional house, where the particular or secret or tutelary deity, Ishtadeva, and his entourage are housed and located. This is the external meaning of mandala. And mandala can be used as a tool. It is also essential factor which can be used as a tool to receive the initiation or abhisheka, luktur, of any kind of the particular tutelary deity or Ishtadeva. But as per the Vajrayana system of Buddhism, especially in the text called He Vajra, the innermost meaning of Kilkur, mandala, is mentioned that in Tibetan, Kilni Nyungbo She Jode, Changchup Semni Dejembo, Lembar Cheba Kinkur Ni, Duba Kinkur Ni Duju. The meaning is that the meaning of mandala or Kilkur, it is a bodhicitta. It is the mind of enlightenment, particularly indicated to the great bliss. And receiving it, and thus called Kilkur. It means that Kilkur, ultimately it refers to the great bliss. This is the ultimate meaning of Kilkur, according to Vajrayana system of Buddhism, particularly written in the text called Ke Doje or He Vajra. And in mandala, there are various kinds of mandala. But this all mandala is designed according to the disciple mental disposition, interest, and capacity. So because of this reason, mandala have different varieties. For example, like a sand mandala, which is very famous and prominent. And then the canvas mandala, Pattachitra mandala, Patta mandala. And the third one is the pile of grains mandala, Tsumbu Kingur. These three mandala, type of mandala, is the outer mandala. The mandala as in a symbolization. To understand the mandala within you, within us. And but these three mandala, sand mandala, canvas mandala, piles of grain mandala, is also designed, architect, according to the disciple mentality and disposition. And also we have bodily mandala. When we are very close to the nature of that preciousness, and the teacher will indicate that your body is your mandala. That means that you are going close to that preciousness. To understand the preciousness, bodily mandala, Luigi Kingur, and then the mind mandala, Semgi Kingur, and then the Sangwe mandala, Dekonanika mandala. These three types of mandala especially refer in the Uttara Tantra text, especially in Uttara Tantra text, according to a new school form of Buddhism in Tibet, and the Maha-Anu in old Buddhist school of Tibet, Nyingma and Sarma. These three types of mandala are made to make suitable to disciple to receive the different kind of empowerment as per the one's capacity, mental disposition, which is ultimately aimed at getting one's own mind mature and suitable for actual practice, which is termed as developmental stages and dissolution, utpatti karma, nishpanna karma. These two is the main practice of Vajrayana system of Buddhism, especially the Uttara Tantra. In order to understand, in order to make your mind mature to move towards that practice, the mandala receiving the empowerment, abhisheka. The word abhisheka is accurate words. Abhisheka, luktur. If we word literally, it's luktur. Abhisejan karna, sinchana, banana, make mature. This is the main purpose of imparting the empowerment. And then after, when the mind becomes mature, then slowly the teacher indicates towards you the teaching of utpatti karma, nishvan karma, developmental stage and dissolution stage of practice. And then at last, in concise, this is about the mandala, the concept of mandala in Vajrayana system of Buddhism. This is my topic. And in concise, the both choga and mandala drawing aim ultimately at getting enlightenment to remain in that preciousness, for which is characterized as four kaya, which is also within our mind, which is considered as a state where suffering get total transformation into eternal bliss. This is what we call enlightenment according to Vajrayana system of Buddhism, especially referring to the Uttara Tantra concept. But the difference is that the choga and the mandala is a part of practice tool in Vajrayana, and choga is the compact form of practices where practice is done through threefold of systematic ways. Here, up to here, this is the concise note, and with this, I conclude my presentation here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very detailed articulation of a very complex process. Of course, the whole the idea of ritual in the Vajrayana tradition is very diverse, and I thank you for giving us sort of the essence of it. And it is practiced at different levels by different levels of practitioners. There is the external mandala, there is the internal mandala, and the range of rituals. I mean, in Bhutan itself, you hear of these. There are treasure lords who perform rites, inspired by Padmasambhava, healing rituals. So there are all kinds and varieties of rituals. But we're very grateful for what the very detailed articulation and sharing of the core aspiration and practice of a fairly advanced practitioner who is practicing, and in some ways we all are, but whose sort of primary motivation is enlightenment and nothing less. And I think for us, at the very early starting out stages, if we can just quieten our minds a little bit and keep it alert on a post-lunch session, I think is aspiration enough. If I could invite Phuntsho, he's an extremely erudite, Balliol College, Oxford. I look meaningfully at Kabir. We were fellow students. So he was at a college which was very academic, and I wasn't. But Balliol was the great aspiration of anyone who went up to Oxford, and he did research at Cambridge and in Paris, and so brings to his articulation and sharing a very, very sophisticated and erudite perspective. And he's going to talk about what, for me at least, is perhaps the cornerstone of this as an aspirant and practitioner, not as a scholar, is Guru Rinpoche as the object of worship. because I keep thinking that, when I visualized Guru Rinpoche, I see quite an amazing man. I mean, his very, how do I put this, his violence, his very liberal sexuality. I mean, the whole presentation of Guru Rinpoche is of a very, well, for want of a better word, a colorful teacher. And how that fits into, for a layperson. Of course, if you look at it purely as metaphor, it's much easier to understand and look at the demons, the projections of the mind. But as presented prima facie, it's quite tricky to try and resolve and understand these. So we turn to you for wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehrotra. Ugin Tsultrim peme dongbesar jewen nam cherang shin hu chendang pe jewen tu sober pemma june dalai pe sor chong. I am a practitioner and a follower of Padmasambhava, but I choose not to give you a didactic sermon for this session as a practitioner, but rather pursue a more discursive discussion, trying to, one, give you a feel, as Jigme Rinpoche pointed out earlier this morning, feel of what Padmasambhava means to the Himalayan world, and two, as a historian, problematize some of the issues that we are dealing with. Yesterday, Ashokar Mura gave a very broad and deep introduction to the world of Guru Rinpoche. What I would like to do is enhance that experience further with some visuals. And images certainly speak much more than words. So, as you see here, the largest Guru Rinpoche statue in the world in Bhutan. And ever since the arrival of Guru Rinpoche in this place, Kurje, where he's supposed to have come to treat an ailing king of Bhutan, and then meditating in this cave, which is embedded in the temple, to his final journey, believed to be on a tigress, approaching the tiger's nest, where he took the form of wrathful, exuberant, wrathful Dorje Drole. You have Guru Rinpoche's stories spreading across the Himalayan world. And in case of Bhutan, you can see how the landscape is now fully impressed by Guru Rinpoche's presence. A lot of these valleys being considered his hidden valley. This is Singizong, is Shinkar in Bumthang, Ura, cave in Singizong. A lot of these sites are impregnated by the power of Guru Rinpoche. And they are literally sometimes on the rocks, as you see in the case of the footprints in Shugda and Chudra. So you could say the entire landscape in Bhutan and of the Himalayas, Buddhist Himalayas, is permeated by the presence of Guru Rinpoche. You can silently watch some of these hermitages perched on perilous cliffs. And through these sites, of course, the influence of Guru Rinpoche is spread across the society. And when you look at art, for instance, which we have discussed already this morning, fine arts is heavily influenced by Guru Rinpoche, both in terms of its content and its use. You also have performing arts. Ashokar Mura yesterday mentioned that I may show some slides, so I've added these. Here's the Pelling Gingsum, the first Ging Cham to point the Rudra, the ego. The second Ging Cham, digging to subjugate the ego. And the third Ging, the Nga Ging dance, to celebrate the victory over the ego. And it also extends to architecture, Bhutan's architecture, and the architecture in many parts of the Himalayas are influenced by Guru Rinpoche's Zangdo Perulri architecture, as we see the turrets of Paro Taksang temple here. One more image of performing arts, the Tibetan Book of Dead being enacted in Bhutanese festivals. And even going further, we have the political institution, the judiciary system, the legal systems in Bhutan being influenced by Guru Rinpoche. That the founder, Shabdrung Ngawang Namgyal himself, is considered to have been prophesied by Guru Rinpoche to come to Bhutan and establish Punakha Dzong as his first capital. Going into literary culture of Bhutan, again, you have Denma Tsemang, who is believed to be a student of Guru Rinpoche, who have come to Bhutan and designed the Joic script that Bhutan today claims as the national script. So the influence of Guru Rinpoche really spreads in all sections of Bhutanese culture and society, and mostly in how people live their life, from the prayers they chant first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, the prayers that we learn as little children, as the representative from the embassy showed us yesterday, the big monuments that we will, the big state festivals that Bhutan puts on. But the most powerful presence of Guru Rinpoche is felt in the rituals, the acts of worship that we conduct. So basically, this is just to give you a feel of how important Guru Rinpoche is to Bhutan and the rest of the Buddhist Himalayas as a very powerful spiritual figure. You could almost say that Guru Rinpoche is the patron saint of Bhutan. Spirituality and religion in Bhutan is almost synonymous with Guru Rinpoche. But then, as a historian, you have to often ask the difficult question of who is Guru Rinpoche? Or what is Guru Rinpoche, rather? Yesterday, we had this explosive suggestion that Guru Rinpoche might be a Tamil instead of a Swat Valley person. In Himalayan history, one of the questions we have to ask is, did Guru Rinpoche really exist and visit Tibet and Bhutan? And there's no conclusive evidence that Guru Rinpoche lived in India in Indian sources that we know of at the moment. There's also very little on Guru Rinpoche visiting Tibet and Bhutan in the 8th century. So some of the scholars have even gone to conclude that Guru Rinpoche is a fictional figure, a figure out of a literary text, a bit like, as Professor Grey Turtle mentioned, a bit like Merlin of the Arthurian lore. There was once a magician, or there was once a person with the name Merlin. There were ideas about this wizard and magician, and they merged together to form the figure of Merlin in King Arthur's lore. In the same way, a lot of scholars have suspected if Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, is a wizard being compounded with a figure who had the name Padmasambhava. So, how true is it then that Guru Rinpoche really came to Bhutan and the Himalayas in the 8th century? As a historian, this is what I do as a work, to dig into the past and see how much we can prove. And I have good news for you, especially those who strongly believe that Guru Rinpoche has come to Bhutan and the Himalayas. So when we look at the early sources, now none of the well-known sources that we work on, the treasure texts, are from his time. They're many centuries after Guru Rinpoche has lived. But when we look at the early sources, the earliest we have access to is the Bashe or the Washe, one of the texts that is certainly compiled and created by the end of the 10th century, may even go back as early as the 8th century. And this text definitely mentions Guru Rinpoche coming to Tibet, not in this very grand form, being invited by the king, but rather as a religious missionary coming to work in Tibet with a fantastic knowledge of irrigation technology and philosophy and science, and that brings a very different, he suggests new ways of developing Tibet, which frightens the conservative ones. So he's asked to leave soon after his soon after his arrival in Tibet. He, in fact, is not seen, according to this literature, staying in Tibet, building the Samye monastery. He is asked to leave long before Samye was even started. Then the second, of course, is a Dzogchen treatise by somebody called Nupsangi Yeshe, and he mentions the arrival of Guru Rinpoche, just like Bimala Mitra and other scholars have come to Tibet. Padmasambhava has recorded. Then we have, of course, the writings by Padmasambhava himself, the most well-known being Mengak Tangwe Tengwa, the Rosary of Views, composed by him, and many other commentaries. So we have fairly good testimonies to prove that the character, the figure of Padmasambhava existed in Tibet before the 10th century. And more recently, after the discovery of the Tunhuang manuscripts, we have now 4 Tunhuang manuscripts mentioning Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava. So this has certainly helped push the dates of Guru Rinpoche back to at least the 10th century. Until the Tunhuang manuscripts came into the picture, most scholars doubted that there was a Padmasambhava before the main treasure literature came to light. Now, one of the things that I want to touch along with this is, when did Guru Rinpoche get deified or mythologized? Now, as a historical person, yes, you could easily accept that he visited Tibet. But how did Guru Rinpoche slowly evolve into the deity figure that we know of, the object of worship and realization that we are used to now? Again, most scholars have argued until recently that such mythologization of Guru Rinpoche, such sanctification of Guru Rinpoche started only with the treasure literature. But we have now these Dunhuang manuscripts that are telling us that the mythologization, this sanctification, sacralization of Guru Rinpoche could have happened much earlier. So this Dunhuang document from at least the 10th century, maybe even earlier, talks about how Guru Rinpoche brings the Vajrayana teachings from Kathmandu, from Yanglishui, sorry, not quite Kathmandu, but Pharping, and then spreads them in Tibet. And he passes on the teachings which begin to spread along the southern frontiers of Tibet then. There's a second manuscript which talks about how Guru Rinpoche subjugated the 7 goddesses of Tibet, 7 spirits, which later on became part of the 12 Tenma deities of Tibet. We have a third document which talks about Padmasambhava having the power of clairvoyance, how he has reached a certain level of vidyadharas, or highly realized beings, with 5 different forms of clairvoyances. And these are here in the old sort of Dunhuang scripts. The fourth one talks about how Padmasambhava wrote a commentary on a Vajrayana text. And somebody called Shanti Garba, who was also a great Indian master who came to Tibet in the 8th century, he checks the commentary and approves that Padmasambhava has done a wonderful job, and also writes this verse of praise. So the verse is right at the bottom of the second leaf, but I have a rendering there in modern font. And that really elevates the status of Padmasambhava from being an ordinary historical figure to almost a deified Buddha figure. And this is going back to the 10th century. So in earliest evidence that modern scholars have found today, saying the sacralization or mytholization of Padmasambhava really dates quite early as in the 10th century. What a lot of scholars are still suggesting is then that you have these texts proving that Padmasambhava has already been considered a very important spiritual figure, but why aren't there any mention of Padmasambhava in the records that are known to be from central Tibet, like the stone tablets that record many other things, the official documents that talk about the emperors of Tibet? Why aren't they mentioning somebody like Padmasambhava if he had the position in the stature that we today think he had? And their proposal is most likely Padmasambhava was more influential on the fringes of Tibet, that he was probably working more along the southern borderlands. And it's interesting, when you look at this Dunhuang document, why I'm showing you this, is right at the top of this is the word Bumtang, Khenpo Bumtangkis. That having done the Vajrayana practice, this Khenpo has managed to set fire to a cliff. So this is a very interesting fragment showing perhaps the place named Bumtang existed from the 10th century, but also is an indication that the Padmasambhava's works were mostly in the southern borders of Tibet. And this, of course, concurs also with the Bashit account of how Padmasambhava, when he comes to central Tibet in the court of Trisong Desen, and he wants to do a certain Tu ritual, ablution for Trisong Desen, the conservative Bon ministers say, oh, this magician is going to bring the Mungyu, the intoxicating water of Min, and corrupt our king. So he is associated with the fringe lands of Mun, even in this early document. So it's quite likely that he didn't really have as much influence in the central courts of the emperor, but was working along the fringe lands of Bhutan, Sikkim, and other areas that are called Mon. And when we look at the most well-known biography of Padmasambhava we have in Bhutan today, the one discovered by Sangye Lingpa, I was trying to do a breakdown of the number of months and years he spent in places that we know today are in Bhutan. It comes to about 5.5 years. And that's excluding all the places on the left side, the right side, sorry, all the places on the right side where we believe Padmasambhava spent time, but we have no exact numbers of months or years. So this sort of gives an indication, perhaps Guru Rinpoche's main sort of activities were done along the borderlands south of central Tibet. And if you look into Bhutan's own sources, or sources that link Padmasambhava directly to Bhutan, this is the earliest from Melmokil. That in Melmokil extracted a treasure text on Hayagriva ritual, and it mentions how Padmasambhava worked for a Mon king called Siddhartha. This story then gets elaborated in the 13th century through the treasure text of Ugen Zangpo, where he brings the full story of how Padmasambhava was invited from India to cure King Sindha Raja. So when you look at these accounts, there is an indication that Padmasambhava perhaps was working much more along the southern borders of Tibet than in the central courts of Tibet. The next difficult question then that scholars ask is, how did this story of Padmasambhava in the central courts arise? And the finger normally is pointed to this person, Nyangrel Nyima, who produced the first full biography of Padmasambhava, Kathang Zanglingma. In his account, he brings a very elaborate story of Padmasambhava working in the royal court. Interestingly, he also has the same verse that has been found in the Dunhuang manuscripts, elevating Padmasambhava to this great master who have achieved the supreme siddhi, who can perform great wonders and so forth. So it's Nyangrel Nyima Yözer who brings the discourse of Padmasambhava as an elevated, mythologized figure in this central Tibetan context. He is followed by Guru Choang in the following century. And what Guru Choang does effectively is he reveals the 7-line prayer that we know of today, the Sigdun Soldep, the concise, the condensed form of prayer to Padmasambhava. He also, this is the 7-line prayer, and if you look at today's accounts of this prayer, people like Mipham have written a whole book as a commentary on this 7-line prayer. It's supposed to have been chanted by the Dakinis when Padmasambhava was conceived on the lotus in Nanakosha Lake. It's also considered to be the prayer that the Buddhists have to chant to invite Padmasambhava to Bodh Gaya when they had the contest with the non-Buddhist. So this 7-line prayer has certainly become the most well-known supplication to Padmasambhava after Guru Choang introduced it. Then Guru Choang also introduced the idea of the 8 manifestations, and it soon got enacted as a dance. Guru Choang also introduced this idea that a tertan is a full tertan only when he or she can reveal a guru text, a dzogchen text, and a Avalokiteshvara text, La Dzogtuksum. So this basically put Padmasambhava right in the middle of the treasure culture, that if you are an important treasure discoverer, you must have a cycle that has Padmasambhava as the figure of guru worship. And after Guru Choang, you see so many other treasure revealers like Dorjit Lingpa and Ratna Lingpa, Karma Lingpa, Ugen Lingpa. A lot of them produce their own full biographies of Padmasambhava. They've also produced the big ritual text with Padmasambhava as the central piece of worship. So what you see is a lot of these treasure texts spreading across the Himalayas, including Bhutan. And if you look at these texts talking about Padmasambhava as an object of worship, you find, roughly speaking, 4 genres. You have a supplication genre, you have the Guru Yoga genre, you have also a much more elaborate sadhana genre, and then an aspirational prayer genre. I would like to take you through very briefly through the 4. Among the supplication genres, we have so many supplications to Padmasambhava, but the most well-known in Bhutan, which Bhutan proudly sort of claims to do it very beautifully, is the supplication prayer called the 7-chapter prayer discovered by Sangpo Drakpa. So you have Sangpo Drakpa there, and it is often performed in a very melodious tune with an elaborate ritual. So I'm going to play a clip of video for you. So in a very elaborate ritual of Padmasambhava, one of the very important parts, the chapters that you have, is the invitation of Padmasambhava and his retinue. And what you saw was that Chenren, or being performed in a village in southern Bhutan. And often such a ritual, such a Chenren, is accompanied by also mass dances, symbolizing or signifying the Daka and Dakinis that accompany Padmasambhava. So I brought these two clips to mainly show you the most special ritual that happens around Padmasambhava in Bhutan. When I have Tibetan Lama friends visit Bhutan, this is one ritual they see is uniquely Bhutanese and is being done also very beautifully and powerfully to invoke Padmasambhava. Now coming to the second genre, we have the practice of Guru Yoga. Now, there is again a very rich, diverse tradition of Guru Yoga, which often comes as part of the preliminary practice, Nyundro. In Bhutan, you have the Guru Yoga practice based on Padmasambhava being done in the Trukpa Kagyu tradition, the Ningthik tradition, the Pema Lingpa tradition, and also Dujum Lingpa's Tersa tradition. So quite a diverse practice. I wouldn't go into details here. The third is the most elaborate, the most grand rituals that we have with Padmasambhava as the central deity. And here you have a full choga practice that has just been explained in the by the previous speaker. You carry out a full sadhana worship of Guru Rinpoche with a full mandala. Among those practices, the most common, I'm going to show some of the very common ones. The most common one or important one is really the Lama Drakpo ritual conducted by the central monastic body coming down from the Drukpa Kagyu school, and the text really composed and put together by Kyunghen Padmakarpo. Then we have this next most important Guru Sadhana practice from Pema Lingpa's cycle, Lama Nurbu Jamso, observed, practiced mostly by people who follow the Pema Lingpa tradition. And then in many parts of Bhutan, you also have Jigme Lingpa's Longchen Ningthik practice, Rigzin Dupa, where the central figure is Guru Rinpoche, surrounded by the 8 Vidyadharas. So these are the main sadhana practices with Guru Rinpoche as the center of the mandala. Some in peaceful form, others in wrathful forms. What you also have in Bhutan, and that's true also for many parts of the Himalayas, is a more specific sadhana being conducted for offering incense and smoke. And this is a typical example of how Buddhism has assimilated pre-Buddhist practice of smoke offering and made it a rigorous Buddhist meditation practice. So you have two traditions in Bhutan that are popular, one coming down from Thachun Namkha Jigme. His river sanctuary is used widely across Bhutan to make the Sarang offering with Padmasambhava as the main deity. Then you have Kunkin Pema Karpo's Tashire Kong Sang offering, also using Padmasambhava as the deity for visualization. The fourth genre is really prayers, aspirational prayers called Mulnams. And here, again, there are so many Mulnams, some attributed to Padmasambhava himself, others composed by people like Ishe Sogel or his other followers. And their prayers composed by even their more recent figures. So the world of prayers to Padmasambhava or prayers to be born in Padmasambhava's copper-colored mountain is an open issue, that you have lamas probably even at this point composing prayers if they're visiting Tiger's Nest or Kurje Temple. So that is one very important genre. And this genre is not only practiced in the monasteries and religious centers, you also find this being practiced in the folk villages. And here's one example of it, a traditional song that's performed in my village, which is a prayer to Padmasambhava. So these rituals are mostly focusing on Padmasambhava as a deity figure. So you see the evolution of Padmasambhava from an ordinary historical person to a mythologized spiritual deity, a divinity. But then we see also another step of mythologization or philosophization almost, of Padmasambhava moving from a specific deity or a person or divinity into a principle. And if you look at the Padmasambhava literature, I'm quoting here some very common prayers that people chant, like Disum Sangye Guru Rinpoche. Padmasambhava is not just one divinity figure, but rather the essence of Buddhas of all three times. You can see how he transcends individuality and specific personality then. The second verse, second prayer coming from Dokhen Sishe, the excellence that combines all Buddhas, all the three roots and the three jewels. You have also a prayer beginning Chabni Kundi, the condensation, the summation of all the objects of refuge. And you can see Padmasambhava no longer being treated as a specific deity or a divinity. In fact, Padmasambhava then becomes a cosmic, universal principle or energy, an enlightened spirit. And this is exactly what I also came across Dujum Rinpoche mentioning in his interview with Lex Hison on a radio show in the United States in 1976, saying, Simnyit Pema Jungnen, your nature of mind is Padmasambhava, if you truly understand it. So what you see is Padmasambhava moving from a Buddhist deity or Buddha figure into a full sort of concept or a notion, a sort of a spiritual energy, so to say. And this is where you see the most ultimate explanation of Padmasambhava being given if you read people like Mipham, or Dijum Rinpoche, that the ultimate nature of your mind is Padmasambhava. That's the ultimate guru. And the best analogy you can find for that is sky or space, totally immutable, open, present, not at all disturbed by the conceptual constructs or fixations or graspings. That ultimate space, the ultimate nature of the mind is identified with Padmasambhava. And all the other things that we see in as illustrations, as artistic representations, rituals, mantras, mandalas, they are just fingers pointing to the ultimate Padmasambhava. So what I then, as a scholar, as a historian, like to see is there is the Padmasambhava principle, a Padmasambhava principle that transcends time and space. And that's what the traditional historians and scholars use to explain the 1,000 years that Padmasambhava has been around in the world, or the multiple manifestations that he can project forth. That is the theory also behind explaining all the confusions or the controversies we have about his birthplace, the nature of his birth. So the Buddhist historians and philosophers normally use the Padmasambhava principle to build a coherent story around all the very different sort of stories or narratives we have of Padmasambhava. But as a person, we have this question of identifying where he was born, when he existed, and what he did in the Himalayan world. And with that, I will stop. Thank you.
Oh, is there? All right, we'll just take a look. I invite Pranshu Samdarshi he's been a student of Buddhism for over a decade, and he has researched with great depth the history and literature of Buddhism in Southern Asia and Tibet. He's a student of Delhi University, and will explore the relationship between sacred feminine energy and Buddhist Tantra practice.
Thank you, Rajiv, Mehrotra ji. I feel grateful, honored and humbled to be here amongst all the Rinpoches and great scholar. I'm yet a student. I'm yet to get my PhD from Delhi University. But I am trying my best to present something what I have, a kind of story I'll share, which I've gone through my research, and of course my research was on Buddhism, and the Buddhist Tantra part was there. So how I reconciled all the historical problem of historicity or historiography. I've done my PhD from Delhi University. So 10 years back, when I was a master's student in Delhi University, some of my friends are sitting here. We are given a book list. And perhaps for last 30-40 years, there has not been much work on Himalayan Buddhism, especially apart from, of course, there is a great work has been produced from Sarnath Institute, and Professor Wangchuk Dorje Negi is one of them, but yet it has not become a part of curriculum of Indian universities. What is part of curriculum of Indian University about Guru Rinpoche, I'll just share. 10 years back, we were given this book. This is perhaps the only one book which in Hindi medium we have, by one of the foremost Tibetologists, Rahul Sankritya, and he was called Mahapandit. Khenpo Chen, Khenpo is Pandit, and he is a Mahapandit. And in this book, Tibet mein Bauddha Dharma, Buddhism in Tibet, what he writes, this book is about 100 pages, and just one paragraph has been given on Guru Padmasambhava, and what he writes. I'll just, it's in Hindi, those who can read Hindi, then they can get the direct meaning, but I'll just summarize it in English. He says that Padmasambhava is a very minor figure, and he was more the sort of magician, and read the last, एक साधारण भिक्षु को पद्मसंभव को आसमान पर चढ़ाने के लिए निंगमा संप्रदाय वालों ने अद्भुत कहानियां गढ़ डाली. Like so this is what we are introduced as a, like this is the reality of the Indian universities. So how I try to resolve it on my own, I'll share that. So of course, this is a recently published book, and this is one of the facts. This that in fact Padmasambhava does not occur in early Himalayan monuments at all. His earliest representation dating to mid or late 13th century. So this is the like a recently published book from professor of SOAS, University of London. This Rahul Sankrityan, I mean, all the works are product of its space and time. He was born, brought up in colonial India. And Britishers, they created their own narratives. This is the unfortunate thing we are still struggling with. That the whole, not just Tantric Buddhism, the whole Mahayana Buddhism, including the great treatises of Arya Nagarjuna and so on, they all were thought to be non-Buddhist. And unfortunately, this is yet the part of our Indian university curriculum. So all these things, and Tantra was of course something sort of, what to say, the kind of dirty stepchild. Like Hindu says it came from Buddhist, and Buddhist says no, it came from Hindu. Like not Himalayan, I'm not talking about Himalayan Buddhism, but of course Theravada and other. They say no, it came from Hindu. So there is a kind of, the Tantra becomes nobody is a kind of dirty stepchild for Hindus as well as Buddhists. So this narrative of of same Buddhism, which is, keep the track of time. How much time do I have?
Time is up. It takes as long as you like.
All right, thank you. So the narrative was created. Of course, it was created. Britishers were Protestant Christians, and they had a kind of reformative agenda to justify their ruling over India. So they said there was a reformer Buddha in your time, and he also reformed whatever all the rubbish the tradition was there. So they propagated, they brought the Theravada tradition. They said Pali is the original Buddhism, and all Mahayana is fake. And there were another group of European scholars, such as you have Italian and French scholars, those who were more interested, because those countries are Catholic countries, and they were more inclined to explore about Mahayana part of it. But yet all the works in those days were based on the biblical studies. And as Lokesh Chandra rightly pointed out, of course I have some difference with him, but still there is a great need to recreate or re-research what we have as a in our university system especially. So in this was H.T. Sankalia, the archaeologist. He excavated all the Nalanda monastery, and he proposed that Acharya Padmasambhava, Guru Padmasambhava, was a Yogachar philosopher in Nalanda University. But at present we have 17 Nalanda master. I have written mistakenly, maybe I have included Guru Padmasambhava in it. But at present in the 17 Nalanda masters, in tradition Guru Padmasambhava is not there. So his texts are not there in the Kanjur and Tanjur. So that's another fact. So let me share another kind of joke I was discussing with my professor in the history department. He said, like, how can you deny that Guru Padmasambhava never existed as a historical person? So another person said, because there is no textual evidence for that. And for a historian, you need to have archaeological, textual, and nowadays we also incorporate the ethnographic sources. So of course in the ethnographic sources we have, but for a hardcore historian, literary and archaeological sources are missing for Padmasambhava. So I said, maybe he didn't write any book in his time. So my professor said, I have not written any book. That does not mean I didn't teach at Delhi University. So there is a possibility that he taught at Nalanda University. But the problem is all through the sources, the Terma text and all, there is a very clear-cut problem related to the historicity of Padmasambhava, because all the figures, for example, Vimal Mitra happens to be an Indian scholar from India, but there is a 300 years gap between the historical time of Padmasambhava and Vimal Mitra. In Pema Kathang, which of course is one of the foremost sources on Guru Padmasambhava, this is, I just took a screenshot from that. So Padmasambhava is saying, I have no father, I have no mother, I have no teacher, nor do I have a master. I have no caste, I have no name, I am a self-appeared Buddha. So this clearly says that he is Guru Rinpoche as a historical person is not deriving his lineage from any, established sources. Maybe he was a dropout. I was just sharing with Kaveri. Maybe he was a dropout of Nalanda Monastic University. So no teacher. And he is a self-appeared Buddha. And that is why he is regarded as a second Buddha in the whole Himalayan region. But there are, again, I'll go back to the historical inconsistency. This is one of the Tantra, which says, a prophecy made by Buddha Shakyamuni in Tantra text, where he mentions that 8 years after I pass into Nirvana, I will reappear in the country of Vajrayana, being the name of Padmasambhava. So again, just this is not in 8th century, just 8 years after. And another Nirvana Sutra which says that 12 years after passing into Nirvana, I will reappear. And Karma Phuntsho ji explained very nicely, he talked about Dunhuang manuscript, that also does not give much help. These are recent discoveries, because in that the name is Padma Gyalpo, Padma Raja. And there is no direct evidence of Padmasambhava with all his, maybe he is a minor figure as Rahul Sankrityana was trying to point out. And furthermore, we have a Saroruhu Vajra, we have a Padma Vajra, and similar names. So what I am trying to present now onwards, that he was a kind of prototype of Indian Mahasiddhas. Of course, in all the 84 Mahasiddhas, his name is not mentioned, the standard one by Abhay Sri Datta. But the kind of prototype which was later on formed. And let me share you that the whole Indian tradition, including Hindu and Nayayika and Vedanta, the canon is not a closed canon. Canon means the canonical literature, the religious literature is, all the traditional masters, they always incorporate new ideas and bring up new smritis, and so it's a not closed canon like Judeo-Christian tradition where you have a fixed Bible or fixed Quran. So there is a possibility of including the new text, which is a kind of Terma text. So in a whole Indian tradition, those people are not aware because of, again, the colonial baggage, but there are huge, all the tantras, the tantra from Bengal and all, they are rediscovered text, a sort of Terma text. Or even there are many versions of Ramayana which are Terma sort of rediscovered. Like one of the Ramayana mentions about Lord Buddha. He says, Bodha Buddhaiti Pramana Pado Kartreti Nayayika. Buddhists call him Lord Rama as a Buddha. So and this text is dated around 8th century. So there is such tradition already existing has been existing in India. So we have this lotus ball idea, Padmasambhava, Padma se Sambhav hua, the manifestation from the lotus. This is again a very old idea. And we have Aryadev, who came, he is again a historical person, he came all the way from Sri Lanka and studied under Arya Nagarjuna. His texts are there, Chatushatak, and also Tantra texts are there. So he is also lotus born. And we have another Mahasiddha who is the Padmakara, or the Saroru Vajra. So there are several lotus born figures. And interestingly, in 14th century, there was a great saint, Kabir Das. He was also lotus pond. We have this Lahar Tara Talab in Varanasi, and where you have his figure manifesting from lotus. There is a small baby figure up to the lotus. So these were the traditions which were already there and are still there. So we have this Kabir was also a manifestation from the lotus, Padmasambhava, like if you take it as a figurative name. And recently I was discussing with Rinpoche there. He said, I'm from Bihar, so he was quite fascinated that a person from Bihar is talking about Guru Padmasambhava. I said, Guru Padmasambhava is everywhere. I will just discuss two case studies which are not so known. Here, this is a Nyingma monastery in Spiti Valley, Pin Valley. I went there, and there the Khenpo, he showed me a figure. Like Guru Padmasambhava, he said that Guru Padmasambhava came here, and he came on horse, and he showed me the painting also. So we have the existence which is perhaps unknown, that Pin Valley in Spiti also he was there. Of course we know in Bhutan and Sikkim and all, but in Spiti also his existence was there. And you will find this, in majority of the monastery you will find all the 8 manifestations which has been all discussed, but I'll discuss one particular formation of this, Guru Pema Jugne. This is quite interesting. Here, amongst 8 manifestations, here Lord Padmasambhava, Guru Padmasambhava is in a yubium form, in a union with Mandarava. And then the story says that when king found out, then he was burnt alive in the lake. Now again, this is a kind of generic narrative. You find this is Lama Taranatha mentioning in the history of Buddhism in India, that Acharya Sarur, who is one of the 84 Mahasiddha, they were burned by King Indrabhuti II. There are 3 Indrabhuti. And again, another Mahasiddha, Dombi Heruka, or Dombi Pa mostly is called. He was burned by people of Magadha. And of course, Padmasambhava. If we look at this is from a book, Chaurasi Siddho Ka Vritant, published from Sarnath Institute, and this Tibetan Institute of CHITS, Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies. So this was another kind of narrative which was used to deify Mahasiddha figure, and which is, if you replace the name of Padmasambhava, Dombi Pa, it will, the story will appear almost same. So he also manifested in the same way. And iconographically, if you look, this is the Mahasiddha Tilopa, and this is Surya Prabha or Nima Ozar, another one of the 8 manifestations. They look very similar. And again, this is from Farping, this handprint. Handprint is also a common part of the whole Indic tradition. For example, in Chitrakoot, we have a footprints of Lord Rama. So this handprints and footprints are also a very common part of a whole Indian narrative. And this is one of the monastery, here Lord Padmasambhava is two concerts, but it looks like a typical Indian god. So nowadays, yesterday we discussed about how this narrative has also gone into the Sikh tradition, where in Ladakh. So now I'll come to this religious syncrety, how the compositeness of what we at present day we call Hindu, this syncretism of Buddhism and Hinduism. So this is from Hemis monastery, where Lord Vishnu and Lakshmi, that figure is there. But I'll take a particular case study of Nepal in Mustang Valley bordering Tibet. There is a place called Muktinath, and here you'll find almost all the major Puranas mentioned about this place. My mother took, this is photograph from 25 years back, she took a very hard journey with my brother-in-law, who happens to be a Nepalese. So she went there, almost 3-4 days full day trekking. And in my family, there is a record for past 8 generations, people I have been visiting. This is my great grandfather. He visited that place in maybe 1927, and this is a portrait painting of his. And almost 1200 kilometers of trekking he took. And the place is actually a Guru Rinpoche shrine. This is, when I visited, I clicked this photograph, the 8 manifestations of Guru Rinpoche. And as a historian, I thought that maybe they are worshipping, because I knew that Buddhist and Nyingma Buddhist were worshipping there. So I thought maybe they are worshipping some, some Avalokiteshwar in form of Vishnu or, but I found out that in fact the Vishnu is being worshipped there. And he is worshipped as a Khyabjuk. Khyabjuk means Vishnu. Vish means jo sab kuch vyaapt. Nuh matlab sab anu mein. Who is pervading everywhere. So interestingly in Tibetan there was a phenomenal task when they translated the terms, they translated etymologically. They didn't just borrow the word. So Vishnu, the etymology, they have translated Vishnu as like this, jo sab mein vyaapt ho, pervading everywhere, pervasive everywhere. So here, and interestingly, again in 16th century, this is Swaminarayan temple. Those who Swaminarayan also went there. He is from Faizabad. He belonged to Faizabad, not a very like modern day Ayodhya. He also went there, and this is a bordering Tibet, upper lower Mustang Valley, and there is a recently created another shrine, and this is what Chuming Gyasto they called it, 100 water sprouts, and it is believed to be brought by Mahasiddhas from the Mansarovar. That is what the Nyingma Lama there taught. And the priest this is the priest of that temple, the lady. And for various centuries, this temple has been taken care of his ancestors. He's a Nakpa with all the hair and all. And he very kindly showed me here is a footprint again of Guru Padmasambhava. Nowadays, this is 2 figures which my mother brought 25 years back, and this is, so now it has become more Hinduized, but still it's a part of Lord Vishnu. So here for Buddhists it's a Khyabjuk with 2 dakinis. For Hindus, mostly South Indian people go there, it becomes a Bhudevi and Sri Devi and Lord Vishnu. So they all are the same. Now the practice of so why this such narration or such a figure was developed and created and incorporated within the whole Buddhist tradition. So here Chogyam Trungpa call the whole Tantra practice as a visual dharma. So visualization becomes a very, very important practice. So of course there is a text and practice. So practice for it's a visual dharma. Visualization plays a great importance. And to visualize you need to, of course it's imagination, as Rinpoche yesterday asked us to visualize a orange in our hand, and then how the visualization and the saliva coming. So visualization actually, in fact this all manifestation, it's if we go by the Prasangika, Madhyamika philosophy, it's all various delightful flower blossom and it's sparkling golden abodes standing alluringly. They are all powered by power of thought. Through the conceptualization, the word is imputed. This is one of the Mahayana Sutra, Upali Pariprachya Sutra. So through the power of visualization, the word is imputed. So ontological reality is existing because of the power of visualization. There is no ontological intrinsic reality. So there, we don't have to be apologetic that there was a real historical Padmasambhava as such. What is more important that the phenomena as an idea, because all this reality is ontologically, it's all subjective reality. So when you become like identify yourself with a Guru Padmasambhava, he becomes your own being. So here, this is the practice, yoga practice, and you can see the great master of Vajrayana recite the verse, and through recitation and visualization, with a great joy dissolved into me, in the state of unfabricated all around my mind, free of fixations, it is the pure Dharma body devoid of all thought constructs. So I think I should conclude now. And this is a prayer composed by His Holiness Dalai, 14th Dalai Lama, and where he says, Khenpo Sant Rakshita Guru Padmasambhava and the Dharma King Trishung Ditsen were the first to open the land of snow, mountains of the light of the Buddha's teaching. Through the power of their aspiration and those all the translators, Panditas and Vidyadharas and disciples, long may these teachings of the Buddha flourish in the land of snows. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, this has been a very illuminating and intense afternoon, and time is running out. I just will indulge myself with very few circumscribing thoughts, and that is that I think ultimately a discourse on Guru Rinpoche has to add up and reflect on its implications for contemporary contemplative practice and discourse. I think, to paraphrase Donegal, who's sort of in disreputed India because of a book on Hinduism, and she said, myth is the double vision of the human microscope and the cosmic telescope. And so I think that when we draw upon religious tradition, we are less willing to investigate the accuracy and how truthful that is. And I think we're seeing unfolding in India the huge risks of treating history as empirical truth. I mean, we can't decide whether Lord Ram, today we have a judgment that says, well, we'll exclude everything. It's probably an area about 200 feet. It was either here or it was there. And so that's the kind of precision that sometimes, turning to historical truth does. So ultimately, for someone like me, and I'm not I haven't engaged in the practice of Padmasambhava, but what's really interesting is that I see it manifest in Bhutan and the way that it has impacted the Bhutanese nation, the process of embracing democracy, of looking at sensitizing themselves to the environment, of maintaining a balance between development and nature, of the role of the king as counselor. These all have resonances from Padmasambhava. And I also see in the Tibetan tradition of, say, someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who, where, in the traditions of Padmasambhava, women are seen as consorts and limited to dakinis. The contemporary, when you're engaging in an intense practice like visualizing someone as a deity whose attributes you want to so internalize that you become them, I think there are many facets of Padmasambhava that in contemporary discourse we have to reconsider. Such as its reaction or response to gender, to violence. So it is the ability of a deity, of a tradition that follows it, like the Bhutanese, to keep responding to it in evolutionary terms. And I think the reason why Padmasambhava is such an attractive figure is that he enables that to happen. And I just flagged the Dalai Lama when I mentioned the issue of women, is that here's someone who spent 40 years trying to develop a consensus so that women can become geishas. And so that is again using a framework of a tradition that enables you to keep changing and evolving and growing. And I think that really is the exciting feature of it, and I sort of flagged it and you didn't pick up the bait, was there were some aspects of this, of Padmasambhava's apparent projected personality that I haven't been able to sort of address and understand and resolve, and feel that maybe they need to be attended to as our perceptions and engagement of this evolve. But I will just stop here and say thank you very much.